I'm not competitive, but I want to be the best at everything. And so
that's the exact definition of competitive.
I'm like, God, should I say that? Or like, it came out totally the wrong way. Or like,
she's truly an amazing human, and I'm thankful every day of being on her team. That was from...
Shit.
I was in Las Vegas to record an episode of my podcast, The Jasmine Star Show, with my guest, Leila Hormozi. Okay, so Leila is brilliant, funny, humble, and extraordinarily tactical. So this conversation is gonna blow your mind. Why? Leila is a builder, so she's gonna walk you through how to continue building businesses, leadership, your personal performance in massive ways. This is also a note to let you know that this is a grown folks podcast. So if your kids are present, you might wanna pop in some headphones because some choice words are used, but we've chosen to show up exactly as ourselves. So let's start the show.
Hi, and welcome to the Jasmine Star Show. Y'all, I have no chill. This is like a full out geek out moment. I had some pre-podcast jitters. I am so excited to have a conversation. I am not in my normal recording spot. I'm actually recording in Las Vegas with the one, the only content queen, CEO of acquisition.com, and the new podcast host of Build with Leila Hormozi. Welcome, Leila.
Thank you. That was really sweet. I've never been called content queen, so that is a new one. I was like, what was that?
Wear the crown. Wear the crown. We'll set that up for you. I'm very, very, very happy. And I wanted to start before we get into other questions. I had a phenomenal woman by the name of Cody Sanchez on my podcast a couple weeks ago. Now, I know that you and her are cool. And I talked to her about the point of entry where I noticed her in an entirely different point. So let's go back to that story because I think it's going to be super interesting to lace together three perspectives at the same event.
Yeah.
So you were speaking at a mastermind in Beverly Hills, and you had a one-on-one Q&A session. And the host is asking you questions, and they turn it over to the audience for questions.
Yeah.
And it was going to be about like a 25, 30-minute Q&A. And I would say probably like the first 15 minutes, people were asking you questions. And then I didn't know who she was, but somebody in the back of the room raised her hand. They said, Cody. And she's like, it's all great on Leila, like how you met your husband and how you dated your husband and where you like to shop. But I would like to know more about how you run a $100 million company. And like, I turned my head, I'm like, she just went there. Who is that girl? I need to talk to her. And so it's like, I start there. And my question is, do you remember that moment? Is that something that happens normally? Like, do you think that's like, if people are asking these questions, what are the questions that you wish people are asking that they're not asking? Because girl, give me the list of questions to ask you. So I know. I mean, but just from a different perspective, like you in that spot, people asking you different types of questions that they might not ask other people.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I've had that happen before. And I think here's what my assumption is that having a successful marriage is more relatable than being a woman that is of my age running a $100 million company. Or now we have a $200 million portfolio, right? So the company I sold. It's more relatable. So I feel like people know what questions to ask. And this is my assumption, right? I don't know. Versus I don't think people even understand what I do. And also it's tough because like something Alex and I have always talked about is like, he will always get more credit. And that is okay. We both understand that and we talk about that. Like it is natural that more people are going to listen to him. He's better at making content. He's been communicating for 7 years, learning how to communicate to a camera. And the way that he speaks, he's so persuasive and so charming and so like captivating. I mean, I listen to him. And so we talked about that because he always jokes. He's like, I always take the credit. But like, he gives me so much credit. Like he's so good about that. And he knows that I get frustrated because I'm like, why does everyone want to ask me about my freaking makeup and shopping and marriage?
Well, like, your makeup and shopping is good too. Okay, like it is good too.
Right. And it took me a little bit of time to understand, but I think it's just that, like, if you also think about like the biggest source of pain for a lot of women, it's actually not usually in the workplace. There's a lot of pain there, but think about it. When a woman if they're distressed in their marriage versus distressed at work, which one is going to take more of her mind share? And often it's distressed in their marriage. And so I think a lot of the times the reason people ask me about relationships is they've just seen our relationship and they assume also, like, let's ask Leila because I'm guessing Alex doesn't want to talk about it. So that's why I assume people ask me that. But I appreciate that she changed the conversation at that event because I felt like I had more value to add to that audience specifically because they were business owners.
Yeah. So when you say people don't even know what it is I do, how about we start there? That will lay the framework. Because you in the conversation you had said, I was running a $100 million business. Now we have a $200 million portfolio. Somebody listening is like, wait a minute, what? Like, what is it that you do?
Yeah. CEO. So I think a lot of people misconstrue what like putting out social media and being an influencer and capturing eyeballs with running a company. And so I think that there's different kinds, and nothing is right or wrong. But I am an operator, and I have made it an initiative of mine to make content because I think that I want to teach more people how to like actually operate a business. And that's something that Alex and I talked about because we sold our last business and he was the only one that was front facing. And I said, you know, with whatever next business we do, like I want everyone to understand there's two sides to this. Like you are capturing eyeballs and then I am building the team and the business and the infrastructure, and you need both, and both are equally important because without one or the other, either you have no business or you have a very small business, right? It's like, and that's what we joke about. If we didn't have each other, it's like either like it would be me and I would never start the business, right? Because it's like I'm so good at operating and building, but like idea generation, not my strong suit. And for him, it's like he has all these ideas. He'd probably have like 17 small businesses, right? And so like we joke about that. I'm sure we would both figure out our way. But like that's where kind of the yin and the yang is. And so it's really once I am given and like once we have the idea, right? Like the idea has been conceptualized. This is what we're going to do. This is the mission of the company. This is how we're going to acquire customers. And this is the idea kind of how we're going to like generally serve them. I'm like, cool, I can run with that and I can build something. Like I can think, what's the team that's going to do that? How are we going to do that? I can go hire the people, recruit them, build the infrastructure, the technology systems, all of that. And then the reason that we've decided to create a portfolio is because I also have realized that I am good at teaching other people to do it. So I was able to, you know, work with our now COO and CEO of Gym Launch and get them to a spot where they could run the business. And I did that with a lot of other leaders. And I felt like that's actually what I really enjoy is teaching other people how to kind of step into that role. And it's not rocket science. You know, I tell people all the time, like being a CEO and running a company is not rocket science. Like, in fact, most people in the company have harder jobs, like more technical jobs that are more technically challenging. Being a CEO is much more people skills, emotional intelligence, you know, understanding communication and behavior change. And so I think that it can be learned by anybody. And so that is what I do. Like I would say I'm an operator through and through. Like if someone were to describe me, it's like, that's my sweet spot.
Okay. So somebody who has no idea who you are, they're tuning in this podcast, in like the nutshell version, explain what happened with Gym Launch and what you guys are doing now with acquisition.com. And I just want to use that as the framework so that people can conceptualize, because we're talking about building. Yeah. Like I want to get into tactical stuff. Yeah. But for somebody who doesn't know, let's set the stage there.
Yeah. So Alex and I met and we started Gym Launch, which was a licensing company. We started out basically flying out and turning around people's gyms. And then we turned that into a licensing model where we licensed our model to gyms. And we've done that now with like 5,000 plus gyms. We took that business, we grew it for almost 6 years. Then we sold it to private equity along with a supplement business that sold through that distribution base of gyms. We made a lot of money along the way. We made a lot of money we've sold. And then we said, what do we want to do with our lives? Like we really enjoyed building that business, but I had to ask myself about a year and a half, 2 years before we sold, like, do I see myself in the next 5 years, 6 years, continuing to be in the space, in the gym space, in the fitness space, in that industry? And I was like, the answer is honestly no. And it's not because I don't like it. Like I love fitness. I work out every day. I'm super into like, I still am a fitness geek. But I just felt like I didn't want to be in just that industry. And I think we started helping people just for fun with their businesses, you know, just like friends. And they would go from like 2 million to like 10, 15 million a year in like a year, just with like simple advice from like 2-hour conversation. And then we said, I wonder if we could do this ourselves with like taking stake in businesses. So we took on 3, just Alex and I, and those businesses skyrocketed. They all just absolutely have killed it. You know, one of them's over 100 million now. The other one's close to 50 million. And then the other one's around 30 million. And so they all went from like just a couple million a year to that, which was crazy. Wow. And that was only in 2 years. And so we said, you know, I don't think this is just us. I think that we really understand this. And so we decided to start acquisition.com, which is essentially a PE firm, private equity, that we basically, what we do is we take stake in companies that are usually around between 5 and 10 million. And we help grow them. So we're a growth partner, essentially. So we take equity in the business. And for that equity, we bring in our whole team. And we basically decide what's the next 3 years going to look like, what's the next year, what's the next quarter, and then how are we integrating ourselves and how are we recruiting the team to build the company we need to build. So, yeah.
Okay, so as people are listening right now, if you are making somewhere between 1 and 2 million, and then you hear somebody like Leila, and she's saying, we have like proof that we can systematize the way companies are run and can scale. So when you started off and said, it's not rocket science, I'm like, there's part of me that's just like, you're right, it's not. And the other part of me is like, but how? Like, those worrying parts. So I want to use this podcast to be like, let's start getting the wheels greased. And so what I want to do is I really want to start with the idea of building. So the whole theme of the podcast is going to be building, and we're doing it in 3 sections. So people who are listening right now, somewhere they're trying to build to their first 6 figures and then to 7 figures. We're talking about like what are the things that they're going to need to focus on then, and then building and leading a team, and then building practical habits. So that's where we're going to start off with. And so I want to start by a conversation before we actually get into building, what I have seen, and please step in and say, no, this is not what I see. I see business owners getting stuck before they even start the idea of building or scaling. So one of the characteristics that we've seen is like, for somebody who's building, and this is what you said, you wrote this on Instagram, that business owners on their way to 6 figures, the focus should be having to change and iterate quickly. And then the characteristics of a business owner on the way to 7 figures is having the fortitude to stay focused and not change things. So can you talk about this? Business owners who's looking to hit 6 figures, what might keep them stuck in the process of getting to that point?
Yeah, it's often just lack of clarity, right? It's that they don't know what to do. So the biggest problem as somebody that is not at 6 figures yet is just they have no experience and they have no insight, and they just really don't know what way is up, right? It's like, do I go left, right, up, down? Like, I don't know. And so it's often just that they get lost in their own heads. And that's actually what tends to be the issue, is they tend to ideate a lot and then hop from idea to idea and not stick through with something enough to even get good at it to find out if it works or not. Right. And that's usually what the biggest, I would say like reason that people don't get past 6 figures, at least from what I've seen, right? I don't have any data on this. Is just what I've noticed is that they tend to start something. They're in the uninformed optimism stage. So they're like, this is the best idea ever. The next, Techstars, the next Facebook, whatever it is. And then as soon as they get into it, what they realize, like anything in life, is that then they're in informed pessimism, which is, all this shit on the other side, which is like with every solution comes a new set of problems. So if you're creating a business that solves a problem, you're also going to come with your own, or solves a problem with your solution. Like you also get the backlash of that, which is like, what are the consequences, the second order consequences of the business you created? And I think that a lot of times when people experience those second order consequences, then they say, this business isn't right. You know what I mean? And so more often than not, I think that people, one, don't think through, what are the second order consequences of my business? Just based on the methodology, the way it's structured, the clientele it serves, just like
Let's
all
get
those.
nitty gritty. So I started my career as a photographer. I saw like a large audience of creative entrepreneurs. And so if we were to take a jewelry maker, if we were to take a photographer, and if we were to take a cake baker.
Yeah.
And they're hitting 45,000
a month.
No. baby girl, we on a different world.
Okay, a year.
Remember, we're talking about the business owners getting to their first 6 figures. And they're at this point to where they can get a few clients and they can get a few cake orders. And it's like just enough and not enough.
Yeah.
And so at this point in time, how do they know what they need to iterate? How do they know what they need to do? Like, are they in like the optimism stage, and all of a sudden, like, I've been doing this 2 years. I've gone from 37 to 45. Like, I don't see me doing anything different. Like, how do I get to the 100?
Interesting. So you're talking more of like a solo operator model. Yeah. Solo operator model. Oftentimes for a solo operator, it's being able to stick with the idea and also leverage yourself out. So now that you've put that in there contextually, a lot of the times what it is like you can't get past a certain amount without leveraging yourself. You know what I mean? So like if you own a cake shop and you're still baking the cakes all day, I mean, that's like that's it. I think Lean Startup uses that methodology. It's like you can't continue to do that. And I think that oftentimes—
It was the E-Myth. I think it was—
E-Myth. Okay, E-Myth.
Yeah.
Like you just can't do that. And I think that what happens is that most people are just trigger shy to decide what they need to do next, who they need to hire, what systems they need to put in place. Because you have to have some level of business acumen, right? But at the beginning, you kind of just need to throw shit against the wall.
Okay.
Right?
This is so good. Because we're actually going to get into the building and actually the how. And so a large portion of listeners are between that 50 to 150,000. And so when you talk about the differences between passing the 6-figure to the 7-figure mark, what's going to keep somebody focused and staying focused.
Mhm.
Like when you had said from 0 to 6 figures, it's going to be to iterate on the back of what you're learning. And then from 7 figures to 8, it's going to be staying focused. So people get stuck staying focused. Like, what do you tell people who have a hard time staying focused on, you hit 1 million, you're at 1.1 and you want to get to 3 and they want to do 1,000 different things? How does somebody hone in their focus?
You don't. You just accept the fact that that's how we're designed. Like if you read the book, The Laws of Human Nature, like the grass is always greener on the other side law, right? Which is like our brains are always looking for the next best thing.
Ooh.
And so I think, and Alex and I talk about this a lot because he's like, he's like, you're very patient and focused. I have all the same thoughts of like, what if we did this? What if we did that? That would be so cool. And I say, shh, that's okay. But I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to just keep focusing here. And so I think a lot of times focus is accepting the path not taken, right? Because a lot of times we're not focused because we keep thinking about the path that we could take, that we didn't take, that we're not sure if we should take. And it's like, just acknowledge that it's okay that that path is there and it's coming into your head, but like, you don't need to do anything about it. So it's not that somebody that's more focused doesn't have distracting thoughts. It's that they don't let distracting thoughts dictate their behavior. See what I'm saying?
Totally. It actually happened today. I don't want to admit it. My CEO, my COO was going to listen to this and I had sent her a message on Slack and I was like, have you thought about this? And we could do this and this and this. She's like, great, but we could do that in 2025. For now, this is the course. I'm like, you're right. Thanks for like bringing me back. It's like everybody needs somebody like your brain because my brain is like all the other stuff and having somebody else to keep them tethered is a good thing. Okay. So for somebody who is like on hearing this, I'm like, okay, I feel like I can leverage myself according to the E-Myth to get us out and beyond like the 6-figure mark. And then somebody who's at that 7-figure mark is going to be like, okay, I can stay focused and put people around me who offset. I actually recently watched one of your Instagram videos about a guy who was asking like, I'm not really an operator. And then you just looked at him and you're like, get an operator. And I was like, wow, deep thoughts. But it's so true. And then you had said, and I really like this point because somebody who's listening, you had said not to overtitle. You said probably just start them as a director.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is super interesting. That's going to lead me to my next thing. So you talk a lot about building a team. And on the back of that video that I had seen, I think that when I look back at my career, I think early on, I was hiring a lot of Swiss Army knives.
Yep.
Like these are people like good. They're good, strong people, good at a lot of different things. And then what I realized as the business grew, I needed specialists. I needed a scalpel. And so, and as I'm looking through all of these things, let's just say, for example, because I feel like examples work really well.
Yeah.
For special people, slow. Like, okay, let's tear it apart. Yeah, let's say I'm looking for a content director. And what process do I need to get set up? Now, this is going back to the jewelry maker who's looking for her first VA. We're looking at a photographer who's looking for an editor. We're looking for a cake baker who's going to need somebody else to do marketing in her business, right? We're looking at whoever these next people are, specialists in doing this thing. I'm going to be looking for a content director. What systems do I need to have in place to bring in not a Swiss Army knife, but a scalpel?
I think that that's not a matter of like having systems in place. It's so here's the issue. The people that you need at that point are Swiss Army knives that must turn into scalpels.
Ooh.
So here's what I hire for. So I'll give you an example. Caleb, for example, brought him in to handle all of our content.
No, Caleb, if y'all don't creep on Leila like I do, Caleb is one of the very first videographers you guys had ever hired. And now he really has grown in the organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he came in and I was hiring for a videographer, but I was like, listen, man, I actually like need someone that can do video right now, but like in 2 months, I need you to like build a team. Like that's ideal. Because here's the thing is that you can either hire one, and then honestly, you're not going to need them at some point very soon. Then you have to hire the other person. So there's 2 ways that you can go about it, right? Either one, you hire the Swiss Army knife with knowing that in a year, they most likely are going to end up quitting because you're going to have to start hiring scalpels. And they're not going to like that. Most people don't. Now, I try to educate people on this and say like, hey, you're a Swiss Army knife. I need you to become a scalpel. Like, here's how it looks. This is what happens in business. And I don't want you to leave. So here's what's going to happen, right? I always try to like narrate it for them because I know because it's happened enough times. However, a lot of people just don't like that because they're like, well, now you brought someone above me and there's people around. It's so different. I used to do everything and you took away responsibility, right? So it's really tough for people to make that transition. But that is one way that you can do it, is first hire the Swiss Army knife, then bring in the scalpels, try to narrate that for them so that they understand this is normal.
When you hire the Swiss Army knife, are you hiring for their potential to become a scalpel, or are you fully cognizant like this person will
I'm just saying that this is the option, that you just hire a Swiss Army knife and you know that they don't have potential to become a scalpel, because a smaller business owner often doesn't have the brand or the reach to hire somebody who's a unicorn, like Caleb, for example. Most people that I hired, Sheila, for example, who does, our head of people, I was like, come in, I need you to recruit at first. And she's like, I haven't recruited in years. I was like, I need you to recruit at first and then build the recruiting team. And then she was like, okay. So she came in and did that. So there's two ways you can really do it, which is either hire the Swiss Army and then accept the fact that you're going to have to, it's almost like looking at it like, it's like in the army, right? It's like there's your session of duty or whatever they call it, right? Like you have a duration. You're like, I'm here for 2 years or whatever. It's like that in a lot of businesses. And the reason that a lot of startups get a bad rap is because there's not enough education about this out there for employees, that oftentimes the organization has to grow in a manner that they will not like and they won't acclimate to. I try to always narrate this to my team. I showed my team one time at a team meeting. I said, 99% of you will not be here in 5 years. That's the stat. In a startup, from year 1 to year 5, I think it's actually 95. 95% of employees aren't usually there. Year 5, from year 1. And it's so funny because I look back at Gym Launch in year 5 and I was like, that is correct. Everyone in that room, pretty much gone. 100 people. Now, is that something I'm proud of? No, because I think that I could have mitigated that if I had known more. But that is pretty typical. If you have a fast growing business, like if you're starting and right now you're listening to this and you're at like 40,000 and then you get to like 10 million, the kind of people even needed, like at the kind of Swiss Army knife you need is so different that it's like, even that's why I talk about not over titling, because I'm like, hey, it could grow. And if it grows, like you want to make sure that title is actually smaller right now so that you can protect yourself and maybe bring someone above them and then educate them. The way I do like to do it, if you do have brand and the ability, is to bring someone in, say, I need you to be a Swiss Army knife, and then I need you to be able to build a team of scalpels, right? So I like to hire from the lead, because here's the thing. You can hire a bunch of doers, but the issue is this, is that eventually you have to hire a leader anyways, and that leader probably isn't going to have hired the same people you did because they know how to do the job better than you. They know how to build the department better than you. And so even a small business, I think that it is worth reinvesting the resources to hire leadership first. I fully believe that because I've done it both ways. And in the beginning, a few doers, yes. However, very quickly, hire the leaders. Like it costs more in the short term and less in the long term. You know what I mean? Because you don't acquire so much managerial debt.
Okay, so I heard you on a podcast, and there was a guy, it was actually you and Alex were on the podcast, and he was kind of like pitching his business for you and Alex to come in, and you guys were kind of like, kind of just were like, no, it's not the time. And I remember listening, and I remember thinking, I was like, is this guy really like getting free consulting? And is he really pitching to them right now? And what is your girl doing? I was like, so I have another question. I was like, I'll send you the bill for consulting. No, I'm saying this because one of the things you had said is there's not a lot of education, and there's not a lot of nitty gritty education for us to like stand in the power of knowing 95% of the people we want to live in the candy land. Like we're building the dream. There's a lot of times that people don't have the ability to take the dream to where it needs to go. And I feel like that statement alone should be really empowering to people who have felt like, maybe like myself, I felt like I let people down. Like I felt like I had to make moves and understanding the team had to change. So if I had known that step, maybe I would be able to step into it powerfully, understanding like this is the cost of growth.
Yes, that it is the cost of growth. And I think that's what I try to tell people. So I'm like, they make it mean that they're so bad at business. They're like, I had to fire these people that were with me from day one. I'm
100%.
Like, most people from day one aren't there on day 657.
100%. So one thing, the story I'm telling myself is I'm hiring a scalpel. I'm ready to hire a scalpel. But then I think this person's not going to want to do what I'm like. I can tell you immediately what they're going to need to do in the beginning in order to have them hire the most amazing content team thereafter. But I think to myself, is this person really going to want to watch archived videos and timestamp and understand voice and understand connectivity and how we can create webs for like YouTube on the back end? Like the story I tell myself is, hell no, that person's not going to do the stuff that we can hire like a stateside VA to do. Talk me off that ledge or say, you're right.
In terms of hiring that unicorn, that person that can
like you hire this like amazing person and like, great, in the beginning, you're going to do this, but we're going to hire out the team. Like,
I mean, I think that it is, I would look at it like this, which is like, I think so highly of you that I want you to come in, see everything we're doing, understand how we do it current day, and then I want you to build a team that can do it.
Right.
That's an opportunity for somebody. That's a career-making opportunity for somebody, rather than like bringing someone in like a cookie cutter situation. And so you have to like that's the thing with like a smaller businesses is you have to find people who are growth oriented. Like, I feel like that is such in every small business, I don't know why they don't have a core value that's like something associated with growth, because businesses grow because people grow, right? And if the people aren't growing, then they're not going to fit in the business. And so for that kind of role, like if you are hiring and you're interviewing the right people, they would be excited by that opportunity. Me, starting acquisition.com, guess who literally contacted all of the people who applied to be a portfolio company? Leila emailed from a fake email. That was like, I'm Leila's assistant, because we had so much. Because I started over with 0. We started with a team of 5.
Got it.
It was like and I was sending out emails, sending out like literally doing everything. I have almost literally like in cash, almost $100 million. And I'm doing it because I value the importance of understanding how something works. And anyone that is astute at business knows that a builder, if you can build, that is more valuable than incremental growth. And so if you give someone the opportunity.
Hold on. I need to pause and repeat a couple of things that I heard back. Under your breath, you had said, at the time I had $100 million cash. Like, I want that to like sit as like a powerful framework for both men and women, but specifically women who are listening, that you would be able to stand in your power and say, that is a fact. And what yet I am doing is making up a fake email address to do the work to find the right person to build. And so I kind of just want to let that like set for people who are listening to be like, this is power. And oftentimes what we do is we want to abdicate the very simple things because we want to be at a different place. And like what we're hearing from a builder is that in order to build, you must do simple things and you must attract the right person. How do you know that somebody is hardwired for growth? Like how do you know that?
I think if somebody's excited at a challenge.
And so how do you assess that when somebody's applying?
I present them with all the things that I want them to do. I don't hold it back. So I'd be like, this is what I need you to do. Okay, this is a fucking impossible job. I need you to come in here. I need you to do all this shit that's awful. And I need you to figure out how to build a team to do it in like 3 months. And they're like, that sounds fucking amazing. They're like salivating over it. And I can tell because their voice will raise. They'll start talking high. They'll be excited. Somebody who's not growth oriented and they tend to, like, get too uncomfortable, like probably levels of anxiety at that kind of thought, is like, they'll be like, oh, well, I mean, like, how long do you want me to run the thing? And how long do you...
Good.
They're looking for an end date versus the other person is like, this is what I'm built for. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that some people, you have to look at like, what do they value in themselves? You know what I mean? Like, I look for people who value the fact that they can work really hard for long periods of time. And like, they pride themselves upon that because that's what I do. Right. And so I know that I need people like that around me to help build this thing versus there's people that don't. They're like, I mean, I had a call with somebody and I was like, here's what I need you to do, all these things. And it was somebody that wasn't Caleb, it was somebody else for that position. And they were like, well, like, I have to be really frank. Like, I am done at 5 o'clock. Like, I can't and I was like, dude, that's totally fine. But like, we can't work together. Like, that is acceptable.
Right.
But not here.
Right.
And like, I make that super clear. I'm like, that's not like, good luck finding a startup that does do that. Or at least you may find one, but I doubt they will grow. Right. And so it's like, at least if it's bootstrapped, right? VC money, it's a different thing. Like a bootstrapped startup business, like you need people like that. And oftentimes the most disgruntled employees and like the worst experiences come from the employer or like the CEO, entrepreneur, not understanding what kind of people they need and hiring button pushers and people that are there to clock in and clock out rather than people who are like willing to like bleed and die by the company. And then the employees not understanding the difference between a startup and a corporation. And so they apply for a startup thinking like, this is gonna be fun. I have more influence. Well, what's the cost of the fun and influence? The cost is that you've got to work your ass off. Now, in neither situation is any person being forced to do anything. This is an opt-in. You're not a prisoner to the company. So it's like some people say, oh, they made me work all day. I'm like, you took the job. If you're at a startup and you're like complaining about how much you're working, I'm like, then go work at a big corporation. But you don't have the freedom. So it's like, what's the cost of freedom? It's like most entrepreneurs will work all day to not have to work all day. And most of the people on the team will work a lot longer to not have the stringent rules and the red tape that big corporations bring. So there's always a cost. You know what I mean?
And do you think that your content kind of like puts up the safeguards around like you're attracting people who kind of subscribe to that philosophy? Or do you think that you do a lot of it like in the job applications, in onboarding? Or is it like you're applying because you know?
All of it is everywhere. We repeat. My favorite thing is when it comes to the end, I'm like, what questions do you have about the job? Where are you lacking clarity? And they're like, honestly, I fucking get it. They're like, I've watched all your content. I've watched all of Alex's content. I went through the whole process and like everyone is very congruent. They all say the same things. And what they all repeat is they tell me this. They're like, you guys all talk about the values. They're like, you guys talk about the values in every interview and you all say them multiple times. competitive greatness, sincere candor, unimpeachable character. Competitive greatness is the biggest filter because competitive greatness is the love of a hard challenge. And that's what I want on this team. That's what we need to accomplish our goals. Now, does that mean that I've created a hostile work environment where people are being pushed to work too long? If the people that I hire like that kind of work, then the answer is no. If I hire the wrong people, then yes, they'll feel that way. So,
Ooh. Okay. So, can I read something on that note?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you talk about attracting the right people, and if I created a hostile work environment, it's not whether or not that was in fact the case. It was whether or not you hired the right person.
I think so. It's all about expectations.
Okay. So I'm going to read something. What most people don't know about Leila is how generous she is with her team and how much she cares. She constantly finds a way to show kindness to others, and it's just a part of who she is. For example, my husband took a job recently and he's going to be traveling on the road. I'd posted on Instagram how my kids were having a hard time. Next thing I know, I had donuts at my doorstep to cheer my kids. If someone is sick, she sends them soup. If someone is celebrating an anniversary, she sends them a gift card for dinner. She randomly sends people thoughtful gifts. She doesn't have to do this, but it's who she is. She genuinely cares about others. She's truly an amazing human, and I'm thankful every day of being on her team. That was from
Shit.
That was from Yasmin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for those of you who are not familiar, I've been familiar because I watched videos and how you accidentally missed a meeting and you had scheduled your own meeting and you went on stories and be like, I'm so sorry I missed a meeting. It's because Yasmin didn't schedule it for me. Yeah. That's why I don't schedule it. And so when I reach out to you on Instagram, I'm like, I'm doing Vegas. Can we do this podcast interview? You're like, talk to Yasmin. And so I got the ins. And I asked her a question. She's like, I don't normally answer like this, but I said, I really want to showcase a different side of how you approach people and how you build teams. And so there was a time when you had launched Gym Launch and you guys are going through COVID. And in one of your videos, you talked about the time that you told your team that for a period of time that everybody had to work nights and weekends to ensure your customers and your company got through it.
Yeah.
What was that process like, asking the team to do that? And then how did you feel as a leader?
I think I was really lucky because I had read a book by Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And he talked about, essentially, you have to let your team know when things are tough. Like you have to be transparent. And it's not that like hiding it does no good for them. And I've never been a hider. I try to appear very composed to people. I think anyone on social media can probably see that because I've practiced enough with my company. But he talked about like we have to be in it together. And the only way, if you read about companies that can come out of a hard time, the only way that they're able to do it is like complete transparency and then complete honesty. And so I told them where we were at financially. I always in every company share all the financials. So I was like, you see the financials.
Wait a minute. Okay. Whoa. Okay. How much of the financials? Like how detailed are the finances?
So anyone in a leadership position, they get the full P&L.
Got it.
All the itemized breakdowns.
Okay.
The rest of the company gets the high level, like revenue, profit, loss, like that kind of stuff.
Got it. Okay.
Only reason I don't for the whole company is I did at one point, and it's very hard for people to understand
Right.
if they're not educated on how to read one, and so it just causes a little more confusion.
Thank you for that clarity. That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So
the hard thing about hard things.
Yeah, the hard thing about hard things, and I asked myself like, what kind of company do we want to be? How could we use this as an opportunity to be a stronger company on the other side? And I'm like, the only way, and if you look, I'll give you an example, right? People that go to war together, like comrades in arms, come out and like they are closer and they stay connected for the rest of their lives because they went through something hard together, right? And I thought to myself, like, that's like kind of how it feels right now with this. Like, it's like our industry is hit harder than it's us in restaurants. But I was like, this team can come out stronger on the other side. I was like, so I want that for us. Here's what this looks like. We all have to work nights and weekends, not because like anyone's lacking, but because if like we all feed Gym Launch. It's not just me and Alex feeding Gym Launch. It's every one of us putting in the effort to feed this company right now. It's too small or it's too big for it to just be like a few people or the leaders like working their asses off. It needs to be the whole team. And so I explained that to them. I explained like these are different circumstances, different times. We're in wartime. We're not in peacetime. So here's what wartime looks like. Here's the difference between wartime and peacetime. And I explained to them to that. And that I got from the book, A Hard Thing About Hard Things. I broke down, here's all the things we're going to do differently. Here's the new expectations I have of everyone on the team. But I promise you, if we get through this, like everyone will be compensated for it. And that's what we did do. It's like the one thing that I didn't skimp out on was making sure that the people that stood it out with us and like really committed themselves, which was mostly everybody, like we made sure that they were paid well, that they were compensated for it, that we, again, like go above and beyond, sending gifts, doing things, like investing in them, giving them bonuses. Like I speak a lot about the hard stuff, but I care deeply about everyone on my team, and I care deeply about people. And the only reason that I hold people to high standards and I am hard on people is because I care about them. Because if you really care about somebody and you want them to be as good as you are, do you expect to do that putting them in different circumstances? No. They have to go through the same hardships you've gone through to become the kind of person. So if somebody joins my team and says, I want to be good at business like you and Alex, they're not going to get that way with me protecting them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So you give that, are you doing this in person? Are you guys doing, and it's probably in Zoom, right?
Zoom.
Like we're back in
big Zoom
pandemic.
call.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's going on? What are the faces? What are the vibes? Like, how do you feel? Like you press end meeting and then where's your head at? Like, what's the story there?
I got feedback on the meeting. So they were hyped. They were like,
okay.
That's because they're the right people for the team. Like I was like, we have the right people. You know what I mean? Like they get it. Grow or die is one of our core tenets there. Like you don't attract people that are like tiptoeing around work, like a lot of other stuff going. Like grow or die is like people are fully invested. They're super bought into the mission, and we had a great culture. And so they were all like, I fucking got you. I would go to war for you guys. Like everyone they were so supportive. And like the reason that company is where it is now, which is like growing and thriving and doing so well, is because of that. Like I am 1,000% positive because everyone's really like stepped up.
So you had said most of the people made it through the pandemic and got the benefits. There was a subsect of people who did not. Was there a common theme of the people who just were just like, I think I'm good?
Yeah. And, I respect them for it. There were some people that left because their priority was not work. It was their family. And they were prioritizing. And that's where seasons of life are very interesting. So someone can be very growth oriented, but it might be that all their growth is going into a different area of their life. And that is
amazing.
Totally understandable.
Right.
Totally get it. And there are sometimes some roles in companies that are small startups that are fitted for people like in that area of their life where they're like, I can't fully, but like I'll check in and do a fucking awesome job, but like I'm out at 4 or 5. And I think anyone that was in that phase was like, hey, I've got small kids at home. I've got to do that. And I was like, totally respect that. Like I get it. We just need extra.
Okay. So we're at that point and we talk about being real and authentic, and you got feedback on the team meeting. So after the feedback on the team meeting, you close the Zoom, and then where's your head at?
I think I felt relief. I tend to always think that I'm, okay, like Alex knows this, like I'm pretty insecure in the sense of like, I do all the things, but like, I'm like, oh, they probably think I'm awful. They probably think I'm a terrible CEO. Like my mind totally goes there. And then seeing the Slack being like blowing up with like, let's fucking do this. Let's go. We're going to crush everybody, eat all our competitors. I was like, it's just like relieving to feel like you have that kind of support. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah.
So pleasantly surprised.
Good. Okay, this is good. So a lot of your content is being really real and authentic. And I think that you sharing the insecurity, I don't think that anybody on the outside would look at you and think, oh, she must have closed her Zoom meeting and being like, she wonders if she's a terrible CEO. Like nobody thinks that. So a lot of your content does show that. And then you show up in interviews and you talk about that thing. So I want to say thank you. But what has it looked like practically at different points in your career? Like how did you have to show up and be 100% yourself? So go back to when you guys were first starting Gym Launch, or even prior to that, at different points in your life where you were in between, I'm trying to get to the 100, to the 6-figure mark. At that point, how did you have to show up and be real and authentic? Because I think that it requires different things at different stages, unless I could be wrong. Because baby girl, you at like 10 figures. I'm not there quite yet. But from what I've seen, it's required different levels of vulnerability and authenticity in the content I create. Do you agree, disagree? What were you doing?
I think that first it's learning how to be transparent with a small number of people, right? Which I think is easier because you establish pretty close relationships with them. And that wasn't too hard for me. So having a small team, being close with them, being transparent, that's never been like super difficult. But having a larger team and learning how to communicate effectively with them in a way that you're considering everyone's perspectives and also still trying to remain true to yourself, because you want to make sure you communicate in a way that everyone understands, but you also want to remain true to your message. That takes practice. And for myself, I think I'll say this. I think a lot of people, stress, anxiety, insecurity is so misunderstood because most of the time people think like, I wish it would just go away. And I'm like, but I look at it like it's just like, it's like care on steroids. Like that's how I think about it to myself is like, I care a lot. Like I care more than most people, which is why I stress over things. Why I stress over being a good CEO is because I care about the company. I care about the people there. I care that they feel included. I care that they feel like they understood my message. I care that they feel like I delivered it correctly. I care about every little thing I say. I'll think about it after this podcast, I'm sure. And so I think that was something that I learned was actually an advantage for me having a big company, was that I cared enough to think through every person's perspective. How will they hear this message? Is there any way that it might rub them the wrong way? Is there any way? And as long as it's, obviously I'll never lie, but like when you are delivering something, there's a lot of nuance to a team to explain things in a way that you include all the departments, you include all the people, you consider all their perspectives. And I think that anyone that leads anything, whether it's a team or a cause or anything, has to kind of think through those perspectives. And then I think going into content, it's like there's small team, then there's bigger team, and then there's kind of public facing. Right, public facing. And I think that...
Well, just pause real quick for a moment of clarity. When do you mark the time that you're like, I'm making a concerted effort to show up online in a different way? What year? When did this happen?
I want to say it was about a year and a half. A little over a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah, we were in Bear Lake, Utah. And I had said for years that I was going to make content. And I just like never did it.
And when you say I said, to whom? Yourself?
Myself,
others?
Yes.
Okay.
Nobody else. I would never tell anyone else.
Okay.
But I did I had like on the side, people like creating podcast covers and like doing stuff like that. And I just like never launched it, like never did anything.
Because?
I was scared. I just truly just like, I care a lot of what people think in my own company. So I'm like, Jesus, what's it going to be like with social media? You know what I mean? I'm like, it's going to be like this on steroids. And it is it sometimes, right?
It is, yeah.
Because you see yourself and you're like, oh my God, should I say that? Or like, it came out totally the wrong way. Or like, do I act like that? Like, oh God. Like we were watching a YouTube video one day and they were like, there was some drop off here. We're not sure. I was like, oh my God, I sound like a bitch. Of course they dropped off. I'd drop off too. You know what I mean? So I think for that requires a level of, I don't think I've figured it out quite yet in terms of like what's required. I think I just keep doing it. Because,
okay, but let's go back to Bear Lake, Utah.
Yeah.
You've been saying, okay, I want to create content. You're saying it to yourself and like low key have like drafts of podcast artwork and you want to do it. But what's the conversation that you have then that you're like, oh, now is the time. Now I've decided I'm going to create. Like, what did you tell yourself? What happened? Because there are people who are kind of dabbling in it. But what I see a lot of is the half in, half out. And you're never going to get a result.
Yeah. I just compared myself too much to people. So if you're asking like, why didn't I start till then?
No, at what point? No, so we understood the backstory of what was the hurdles
start?
and then what made you start?
I think that I just remember waking up one morning. I think I was just pissed about a few different things that were happening. And I had like a free morning until noon. And I literally just was sitting there and I was like, what am I going to do till noon? I finished all my work yesterday. Like I was just like, we're in Bear Lake, so there's nobody there. And I just got everything done. And then I was like thinking, I had a little thought pop up that was like, you should make content because you said you're going to do that for like a fucking year, bitch. And
you talk so nice to yourself.
Yeah, I know. Hey, it's effective. And I was like, get up and make some content. And so I was like, okay, I have a ton of content. Like all my team training for the last 6 years, I basically take and turn it into content. So I was like, here, I'm going to go. And so I got like 3 modules. I filmed them out of just, honestly, I think it was just being frustrated with myself. Like I was just angry with myself.
And so on that day in Bear Lake, you pulled out your modules.
Yeah.
I
drafted them. I looked at Alex's content. I said, what's the framework of like making content? I watched a few of his videos. I wrote down the general framework.
God, you're such an operator. God, you're such an operator. My brain is not even working. Okay. So
and
you
then
looked
I was
at
like,
it, you saw the framework.
So here's the framework. And I was like, if you want it, here's your framework for how your content looks. And then I made it 3 of them. I filmed them.
Like on your laptop?
We had a camera there.
Okay.
So it was like a tripod or something.
Okay.
And then Alex had a YouTube guy. I was like, I'm going to show you this to your YouTube guy. I want to see if I can just start a YouTube. And he was like, okay. And so then I got a hold of the YouTube guy that day. He said, send me the videos. I download them, send him. And then he's like, you can't use these. Like they're filmed way too far away, something. And so I was like, fuck. But I was like, don't do them again. So then I woke up the next morning. I refilmed all of them.
We need to pause. That is where people quit. Is like, I did the work. I have to do the same thing again. I'll get to it when I get to it. And then the difference here that I just want to cite is like the next day you have to do the same amount of work and you decide to do it again, your mindset is what at that point in time? Because I'm really trying to, like, you think different. And I don't think that you actually like understand how different, like you talk about flipping the script and like you talk about like a YouTube guy saying no, and then you say yes. What's happening there?
I didn't think of it like work. I thought of it like practice. It's practice. Like every time you have to refilm something, every time you have to do something again, it's just you can get better. So I'm like, they'll be better than they were yesterday. You know what I mean?
So you recorded them, you sent it to the YouTube guy?
Yeah.
And it's off to the races.
Then that was it.
Did you have like a commitment of like, this is what I want to do like, X amount of times per week? Or
I said that I will commit to making the videos and not stopping. And that is what I will commit to. Whether it's, I will make no less than 1 a week. But, you know, we started at, I think 2 or 3 a week. And I was like, at some points I was like, not going to do that many because this is my priority, the business over here. So it's like, my commitment's just been like, something will go out every week. That's what I'll commit to. And I'm not going to stop no matter how I feel. That's pretty much it.
Ooh, I like that. I'm not going to stop depending how I feel.
No matter how I feel.
No matter
well, here's
how
the thing with content is like, I don't do it full time. I also am married and partnered with somebody who is like a savant at content. So I compare myself constantly. Like you have to understand, like I'm always like, analyze my thing. He's like, babe, it's like you're growing. And I'm like, I know I could be better if I wasn't so consumed with running and building the company, right? And it's very frustrating to me because like what you don't know about me is like, I'm not competitive, but I want to be the best at everything. And so
that's the exact definition of competitive.
I don't think about others though. So let me put it that way.
Yeah, you're
I
competitive
don't
with
think
yourself.
about others. Yeah. I just want to be the best. And I'm like, I know what I could do. And so for me, that's probably been the hardest part about making it. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way because a lot of people now are getting into making content, but they're also running a business.
Yes.
And I think it's really hard because you just compare yourself to also people who might not be running a business, right? There's a lot of people out there who make content and like they're an affiliate, they make money off this. And like I've met a lot of those people and I learned from them. But I've also accepted and am continuing to accept over and over again that it might not ever be as good as that in terms of the delivery because I don't have as much practice. You know what I mean? Like if you don't get as many reps, then you can't expect to be as good as that person.
That is so good. Okay. So you shared on Instagram that how you've come to embrace that work cannot mean stress. And so I think that in that way, I'm thinking about how you decide to show up, putting in the reps. Do you ever associate not putting in the reps to the capacity that you would like as stress?
I think I used to a lot more. Like I used to be so uptight. And then I realized it wasn't serving me. Like it served me to a point in my business. And then like being very rigid and uptight stopped serving me so much. Because like I tended to be like, I want to be the perfect CEO. I want to have the perfect body. I want to have the perfect husband and marriage. I want to have the perfect friendships. I want to have the perfect, like I always was like, and if it wasn't, I would be very upset. And then I realized that I was just consistently upsetting myself because I set unrealistic expectations. And so I looked at my life and I was like, I had this like successful life, but I've been stressed for most of it. And this was probably 2.5 years ago. And I was like, why? And I was like, I continue to set expectations that I've literally never met. And it's not for lack of trying. It is for like, I try every day, the whole day, all day, every day. But it was realizing that there was nothing wrong with how I'm doing things. It's just the expectation in my head. And I think understanding that like, if you exceed expectations, you're excited and happy. If you don't meet expectations, you're constantly frustrated, upset, stressed. And I just had to reset expectations with myself. So that's why you hear me talk about like, the goal is to be imperfect because I will still try very hard. But if I make the goal to be perfect, I will be very stressed.
So is that the mindset shift that was required 2.5 years ago for you to release that? It's just instead of saying, I want the perfect life, husband, business, I want to be the perfect CEO too. Yeah. I'm going to be imperfect, not for want of trying, but I will be imperfect. But every day I'm going to be committed to doing it again and trying. It's
how I can get through my days, honestly. It's like something doesn't go right. And the first thought that comes up is like, fuck, blah, blah, blah. And then the second, immediately, like, and it's faster every time, is like, this is good. You are learning to adapt. It's good to be flexible. We don't want to be perfect. That's the next thing. And it's always, okay, it's good. You want to be flexible. We don't want to be perfect. And I think for me, that's how I manage my own self. Just like reworking that.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up the conversation a little bit, but I want to talk about 2 practical things that people can do as a business owner and as a leader. So the first idea of regularly practicing things that make you feel uncomfortable. I know you talked about this on Instagram. Why do you think it's so important for business owners? And what does this practically look like for you now? I think you kind of shared about that a little bit right now, but
Mhm.
a little bit more context to see what it's like to be in your head. Because I think that what social media does, and it's great at, is showing somebody 0.001% of somebody's life.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about the goal to feel uncomfortable, what does that actually look like for you?
I think that we regress towards, whatever we train ourselves to do more of, or whatever we accept, whatever we train ourselves to do, whatever we practice is what we tend to, it only grows, right? And so if we're constantly avoiding something that's uncomfortable in any area of our life, we tend to do it in all areas. And so for me, the reason I talk so much about discomfort is because I think most people talk about it because it's just, you notice that if you do it in one area, it stems to the rest, right? It becomes like a practice because it's almost like, I don't know much about it, but it feels like I start to get excited, right? Rather than nervous if I pursue enough things that are uncomfortable. It's like my natural reaction to something uncomfortable becomes excitement rather than nervousness because I've built enough confidence in myself from doing those other little uncomfortable things that when something bigger comes or something that's like unexpected, I actually have a different reaction to it. I'm like, oh yes, good. Let's do this because we know that we can rise to a challenge.
Like
right?
what, can you give an example? I mean, obviously if it's personal, it doesn't have to be shared, but what's something right now in your life when it feels like life looks quite grand? What is something that you initially thought, wow, that makes me uncomfortable, to, wow, I'm excited?
I mean, we're doing it right here probably, but like, seriously, like all things content related would be one. Like everything with content, I get uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable the night before. I'm like, oh, did I write my scripts correctly? Did I do this? Are they going to suck? Like, it's been a hard week. What if I sound like an asshole? Like, I think about that a lot. And then in terms of like in the business, it's, it's so funny. I'm so much more comfortable in the business than anywhere else. Like I feel so good making decisions in the business and operating and helping other people. I actually don't have, it's like where I feel the most comfortable. It's like for some reason
and I'm so glad we're doing this. Like it's nice to see you squirm.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. No, that's why I wear black. I'm sweating. No.
The second idea outside of being uncomfortable is to expand your work capacity. Now, before I saw your content, I actually saw a meme. Did you know that your calendar got turned into a meme? You saw that? Okay. Okay. So for people who are not familiar.
I don't know which meme you saw.
Okay,
but
for people who are not familiar, and correct me if I got the chronology. I probably said it wrong.
That's okay.
As I'm a very famous podcaster. Okay, so I got the timeline probably wrong because I saw the meme before I actually saw the piece of content. But if the content flows as such, you talked about your work schedule and then you shared a screenshot of your actual calendar in which you said, this is my actual calendar. Yeah. And then when I saw the content, my first thought was gangster. Like, yeah. I got hype. But there was kind of like this total opposite reaction to people seeing your calendar, which is who wants to live like that, essentially.
Yeah.
What did you see on the back of that? Because I think it goes back into like expanding work capacity. And what does that mean for you? And then what was your reaction when seeing people have such a strong reaction to
I don't think I qualified the content enough. So like, you also have to understand like my team takes and teams take what I say, we draft them and I look through and approve. And like, I'll be like, okay, we'll take my words and put them on LinkedIn. Then like maybe I write them, but then we take them, we rephrase them for a different platform, right?
Yes.
So I go through and look at it all, but like sometimes I'm barely looking at it, right?
Got it.
And I think that if I was paying closer attention, like the way that I would have portrayed it is like more qualifiers, right? And this is my fault. Like I sometimes speak without qualifying, like this is my calendar. This works for me. This doesn't mean that I think you should work this way. Because it doesn't. But I think that people took it as the way that I posted it. They took it like, if you don't do this, you're less than. Like, I think that you almost have to say like, hey, I totally respect you if you don't work a lot. And if that's like what you want, you just want a lifestyle and like chill and like, I don't have kids or anything. So like, what else am I going to do? You know what I mean? And I work with my husband. Like I get to do that with him all day. It's fun. So I think if I had added in more of that stuff, like it probably would have been taken a much different way. If I were like, by the way, I run this business with my husband, so I get to hang out with him all day, which is awesome. I love doing this with him. I also don't have kids, so I don't have to fit that in. And I'm lucky enough that I get to design my own schedule, so I get to, put my work out whenever and do all that. And if you don't like this and you don't want to work as much, then, more kudos to you. I think that oftentimes, if you just put things out there like that, it's taken like as people that don't want that schedule take it like I'm putting them down. I think that's what it is at the end of the day. And I think at the other side of it, that the way I phrased it, it sounded like a big dick move. You know what I mean? Like, look at my calendar. And I was like, I wish I didn't write it like that. Like, so I would be totally fine standing up for that post if I had written it in a way that I felt like was true to who I am and how I actually talk. I don't think I did.
I did not expect that from you. Like,
really?
to me, it is just like such a humble bow. Like, okay, I was outmatched in this. And like where other people come out and recoil from, like, grow up. Like what I do has nothing to do with you. And what you had said was, I could have done a better job prefacing that this is what I do.
Yeah.
And so it just shows a level of humility. And on that note, talking about imperfection and then talking about work capacity. Can I read something?
Yeah. Oh man.
I know. I was like, oh shoot. Leila has always been independent and set in finding her own way. She is persistent and resilient. She has a huge heart and cares so much about the people around her. As a freshman, she started working at a cafe and was soon supervising people. The manager always told me she was grateful for having Leila there. A couple years before her college graduation, she told me she wanted to live alone, and it seemed like she wanted to work on herself more. I was so proud of her when toward the end of college, she told me she wanted to do an internship in California. We lived in Michigan, and she applied for a position that was coveted by many. She flew to San Diego for an interview by herself and was offered the internship. Most people wouldn't even apply for such positions when they know there is so much competition. But she spent a summer in California, living in a cabin by herself, and sometimes working more than 16 hours per day. When she graduated college, she decided to move to California without a job. She drove across country. We followed in a separate car. And she managed to get a job, learn about sales, and find a way to do what she wanted to do. Her independent mindset is something I admire in her. We talk a couple times a week, and we keep in touch daily via text. I think of her as a gift that was given to me by God. She makes me proud every day to have a daughter like her.
My dad.
That's your dad.
Yeah.
I actually read what your dad wrote. And part of why I get choked up is when your dad responded to me on Instagram. Your dad.
My dad was probably so freaked out.
No, I sent the video. I was like, hi, this is weird. I'm interviewing your daughter. I think she's amazing. And I want to show a different side to her. And could you tell me? And he just wrote the kindest words. And so when he responded, I was like, Leila's dad responded. And I read the message to my husband. And part of why I get choked up is my husband looked at me and he said, oh, we're raising a little Leila Hormozi. Our daughter, the way your dad speaks about you is we could already see in our daughter who's 3 years old. I was like, oh, she possesses all of these qualities. She's going to want to live on her own and move out. She's going to want to live in a cabin. I'm already crying.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I'm so thankful that you did this. I'm so thankful that you made time for this. I'm so thankful that you have people around you who talk more highly of you than you could ever speak of yourself. And every expectation that I ever have coming into someone was like, wow, they're both so far superseded by just who you are as a person. Thank you for breaking barriers for women. Thank you for doing the show. What is wrong with me? I didn't even come together. It's like, I read notes from that. I read notes from that. And this is the last thing you want. 2 business women crying.
I know. I've said that before. I'm like, no.
We are back the female entrepreneur, executive. It's like, here we go. No. I'm just so thankful. This was great. I think you had added so much clarity around what is not spoken about. I think you show up as a very strong female entrepreneur. I think you taught us lessons on showing up despite how we feel about creating content or doing something that makes us uncomfortable. And I think you also humbly showed us that even when something goes out, there was a lesson to be learned and not for you to fight for you to be seen a certain way. I want to say thank you 1,000 times over. Y'all, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please send Leila a DM on Instagram. You're Leila N. Hormozi.
Yeah. If anyone can get me the handle Leila Hormozi,
if we can do that,
you will be compensated.
Fairly compensated. Let's go. If anybody can get Leila Hormozi on Instagram, but until that point, send a DM to Leila N. Hormozi. This is the Jasmine Star Show. I'm so thankful you guys are here.
Thank you.